Well, hey guys, this is Matt Monaco here, and we're here to discuss a few things related to turning an end grain box. In this case, what we have is a very figured piece of ambrosia maple, and it looks like that we have a pretty deep bark inclusion in this area. And I assume that for this type of box, what I'll do is make something that has a finial on it, and this will probably account for that section. We already have our blank set up right now. Our end grain fiber is essentially marked for X as the center on both sides, so we'll go ahead and actually get this started. I'll go ahead and put my safety glasses on, and we'll get going. The first tool that I'm going to be using will probably be a larger Skew, 1 3/8 or a 1 inch, we'll see. We'll go ahead and get started just roughing this piece down, getting a good idea as to what the layout will be for this particular piece. At the moment, all we have is essentially a hunk of wood, which will turn into something hopefully really nice. Let's go ahead and plane the exterior and see what we can do with this piece. It's a really nice piece of material, happy to work with it. Going to make sure firstly that I've set myself up properly. Looks like I don't have the ability to, with the longer tool rests, get all the way in to this portion of the headstock. What I'll do in that case is just extend the tailstock quill out a bit, and that should be good enough for us. Now moving this in, I just have to remember that I'm at a particular height when I'm planing. It's about at the same height that I would be at if I was applying usage with the spindle gouge. I want to make sure that the blank is in a stable and perpendicular position here. I'm also making sure that my setup is accounting for not the piece sitting square, but rather ever so slightly tilted. And I want to know that the area where the actual cut's being made, where the proper point of symmetry is for a better cut's going to be, that's where the supported edge is going to be somewhere from the center of the skew downward. In this case, I use a more, not an oval skew in that the stock is convex swept, it's just square stock, but I'm using a skew that has a sweep on it. I prefer that. And I find that that helps me get just a greater amount of purchase in terms of the amount of bevel support that I need to make my cuts. This is at a pretty good height right here. A little higher than lower is preferred. In that case, what that looks like is to say, tilt the skew up. I should have the area where the supported edge is going to make my cuts be somewhere that's maybe about 3/4 to the top of the blank, close to the top of the blank. And I'm looking at that line right there, and that's above the center. That's maybe 3/4 to the top, close to it. That should be a good place to start. Other thing that now I have my proper distance set, I believe. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. That looks pretty good. I need to make sure of something, and I'm going to go ahead and lock the spindle. Locking the spindle is going to show that on the 4-prong center side, on my headstock, I have a little bit of play, too much. A little bit's always going to be too much in this case. Let's go ahead and tighten that up. A few quarter turns at a time should be okay, and if we look into the end grain fiber from the prongs again, looks to be good. I don't want to over tighten it because if I do, the piece will bow. Not such a strong consideration in this case because this piece will be parted in half, of course with a lid and a base and section and 2 tenons. So my fiber is actually facing this direction, essentially the longer grain running with the bed. So what I'm looking to do is not start at the center of a blank to create, not necessarily a catch, but to pull the grain out. I'd rather start from an area where I have much more of a runoff point that's near the end of the blank, then I can actually drift those cuts directly into, well, a space. And I'll account for that with having a little bit of overhang on both sides of the blank, left and right. So we can go ahead and get started now. Unlock the spindle, and we'll actually be running at a fairly high speed. Let's see about where we're going to be running. I would say that we'll be somewhere around maybe about 1800 RPM to 2000. Just raise it up a hair more, and I think that's going to be fine. Take our skew with the short point, or the convex region of the tool. Body makes the cut. I'm accounting for the handle at the side, moving the tool forward. But I'm also, as you can see, moving the tool back. That's with enough bevel support to account for doing that. And I'm really just looking to get underneath this bark inclusion if I can. I'm pretty sure I should be able to do that. Just looking for a cylinder. Not a lot of pressure into the stock. That pressure, again, is usually always going into the tool rest more than anything else. That's a good sound. Maybe not so much over there. I also have a gap. I'll go ahead and actually move the tool rest in a little bit more. giving myself about a 3/8 of an inch gap is fair. I can go to the left or right with the long point or short point. In this case, I'll go to the left with the long point now. One thing about truing up a cylinder is that when I'm doing that, I'm not actually digging in with the long point. There is a little bit of a gap at the long point and the material, and that's just for the sake of knowing that my actual balancing act, so to speak, is on the bevel in the supported region of the tool. And that's where you see that dust on the skew. That's where the actual supported region is. Let's see what I have for a surface. Looks like we still have a little bit of undulation. I wonder if that's from a square section still present or the fact that we may have bark inclusion involved here. And what do we have? Looks like it's just a square section, and that's really inconsequential to knowing which side we have our finial on. It looks like we've got underneath the bark inclusion. I'm looking for something now. That's to say splits. I don't want splits. I want to make sure that what I can see is nice clean grain, and that on my end grain fiber, don't see any at all, and that looks good. So I'll go ahead and actually still continue getting myself into a pure cylinder here, and the hope will be to turn this into a box section accounting for what section will actually be the lid and the base. And to me, I'm looking at this and view that I have enough figure on this piece that I can account for probably either side resembling that at the moment. So we'll go ahead and probably just draw a straight line at the very dead center. And that's going to be good enough for us. So what I'll do now, drop the tool rest just a hair, realize that there's something else that needs to be done. Well, that's not such a good thing. I'm not so happy with that. I'll go ahead and actually true up both sides of this undulated end grain fiber. Firstly, just taking a peeling cut. A peeling cut is when I'm actually taking the longer fiber, but I'm not cutting into it. I'm actually cutting across the grain. So as I'm doing that, I know I'm getting a clean cut. Also, I'm making sure that when I do this, the long point's facing the end grain fiber, just as it is on the other side. Just to remove a little bit of stock. I'm not aiming for a clean cut right now. It doesn't matter at the moment, but I just want to make sure that I can pair these ends, make sure that it's a clean enough cut that I can read a split if there is in fact one here. And it looks like there isn't one present on one side, and the other looks clean enough as well. Not the cleanest cuts in the world. The point of roughing at the roughing stage of any project is to not have a perfect surface necessarily. If you have a clean surface, that's nice, but it's not a commentary on where you need to be at the moment. You're mostly just getting the vibration out of the piece. So the inherent vibration needs to be gone. If I can get a fine shaving, that's great. I'm happy to do that. Another type of cut to make, if you wanted to true up the end grain fiber to make sure that the end grains are as clean as the exterior so that you can in fact read something like a split, you can also take a different skew. And I find that it's a little easier if you have something that's a little smaller. This is a 1 inch. This particular skew is 1 3/8 inches. Good skew, but it's a little large for the job at the moment. I'm chamfering the other end now, essentially making a V groove. What that does is help the point of entry at the cut on the corners here. And so what I'll be able to do now is not be flat, but rather be in a position that will account for my being able to make a shear cut at the corner. And essentially what I'm doing is taking the tool into what would be a V groove. That's essentially a V groove. Here's a V groove now at the center, doing the same cut at this chamfer. What that's accounting for is now being able to essentially roll the bevel into the surface. Not into the surface so that the unsupported region of the tool, that's this region here, will catch, but just enough so that there's movement forward with that bevel and I can get a nice surface. If I can see a fine surface at the roughing stages, I never think that's a bad idea. It's always good to allow yourself to see a clean surface in this stage as well. And then again, it's knowing something else. It's that this is wood. It means you can burn it. I'd rather turn it, but if I can burn it, that's more commentary on the fact that this would maybe have splits all over it, or this would be something that might not even be safe to work with. But this looks like a very clean cut. It's revealing fresh fiber, and I'm happy to keep working with this. So this is now at a stage where I can see that the piece has been turned clean enough, I can keep going. Now I'll go to the other side, true up the other end with the long point of the skew. Sometimes I get asked questions in my courses regarding using the short point to peel, and in this case, not peel, but to actually make a shearing cut. You really shouldn't, because this actually represents more of an inverted sweep at this stage to the long point leading. It's much easier to lead with the long point, having the sweep convex swept in a more asymmetric fashion. In this case, I don't actually have an issue being able to read or see the grain at all. So if I'm turned around, it's not that you can't use the skew to clean up this area. You certainly can. The issue is that I cannot actually read the cut. So it's also nice that when you're turning wood, you can actually see what you're doing. That's not a bad idea. So keep going. Other side, still making a right-handed cut, just not so centered to the lathe stock, just moved ever so slightly to the left. Maybe make one more cut, which to me doesn't mean much, because for me one more cut means there's going to be quite a few more. I think what I should start saying is another cut, because one more, again, usually means quite a few. Now what I'll do is realize that I have a piece trued up. I know that I'm far enough along to see that the grain is clean. Very nice figure in this, very spalted, not too spalted enough, but very highly figured piece of ambrosia maple. Really beautiful stuff to work with in this case. I'm going to be using a thin parting tool to part this piece in half, but I'd rather do something first. I'd rather first put tenons on this piece on both sides. And then there'll be a determination after that as to which side I think will be the lid and the base. It's a bit arbitrary at the moment because I have healthy enough wood to make it happen on both ends. Maybe a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. All I have to do is take the skew straight in, and when I get into the corner, I'm rotating the tool into it a little bit, ever so slightly. That should be a good tenon. Now, that's a spinning blade, essentially, and I prefer keeping the blood in the veins. That's a good policy to maintain. And now that those sections are soft, blood's still in the veins, that's a good day. Long point's always going to be the side of the tool that makes the tenon. If I use the short point, essentially what that's doing is, because this is the convex swept region of the tool, I have to move my body over significantly to make that cut. It's not that you can't do it, it's just really the wrong sweep. It's more of an inverted sweep towards your face of the shoulder here, and that's not exactly what I want. It's going to be much easier to be able to just take your long point, move straight in, and that looks to be pretty good. I think I'll be okay with that. Again, same thing, I want to make sure that I'm eliminating sharp corners, making a couple of little chamfers on both sides. So now at this point, I'll go ahead and make a determination as to which side will be the side that has the finial on it. And this is a figured enough piece that I think it's a bit inconsequential. I don't think it matters much, and I see it, and so I'll just decide that this will be my lid section. I think that this is going to be okay. Being that's the case, why don't I actually go ahead and mark the lid and the base? So I'll put lid and base, so we can go ahead and do that. It's nice to know that where we're at in this process. So pretty nice finish at the moment. It's good to know that if I can observe my blank lid and base sections, that I'm clean enough on my cuts with bevel support that I can see that this project's actually worth continuing. Again, there is such a thing as firewood, and wood does grow on trees. So you can, in fact, burn it. You can also turn it. In this case, this is a beautiful piece that I think is worth actually getting somewhere with. And there we go. So here's our lid section. We'll go ahead and actually part the base section off right here. And going to both keyholes is a fair thing to do. So we've done that. Back to business. Full speed ahead. I'll use a thin parting tool in this case, as that's accounting for about what will create a reasonable join between centers when the box actually fits. And it looks like we're getting close to the end here. Just let that fall off. Now we can actually work on the lid section. What I'm going to do first is realize that I've chucked this up now, so I'm on a slightly different axis. I will actually true the exterior up once. You can use the long point or the short point. Bevel rubbing first is always probably a good thing to employ. I don't actually have to make a planing cut. I can also make just a scraping cut. I do prefer the bevel support alongside high speed and getting a nice clean cut. It just feels good to use a skew. When a skew is working out, it's being good to you, or perhaps you're being good to it. One way or the other, that's a good thing. Good days mean that you're getting along with the skew. And that's just going to show that I've trued that section up. Again, I'll do the same thing. That's a spinning blade now. Again, I'll chamfer that corner. ever so slightly, and that's looking pretty good. The thing I need to know is that what I'm going to have for the width of my box is going to be maybe somewhere around a proud 1/4 of an inch initially, and I imagine that this will get a little thinner as we go. This is also going to show something, is that the region from the corner of my diameter of the lid section from about here into that region needs to be true. That needs to actually be trued up and of course cleaned. I'll use a slightly smaller skew for that, and the 1 inch should be fine. Although it's larger, it's not so cumbersome. There we go. Chamfer is a little bit easier to then take a V-groove into that region, and I'm now just facing this region with the long point. I can go directly into where the end of that pencil line is, and I think that's a pretty nice surface. Let's actually see. You have to slow down the lathe to actually see what's going on here. And looks like that's torn out area. That doesn't matter. That's coming out. But what's above it in this region, going to sort of denote the width of my rim at the moment, is going to be okay. I'm going to have to be a little careful too, because I have some spalted regions in here, and I probably will keep the lid a little thicker in this case. That's a possibility. We'll see. We'll cross those bridges as we get there. So I'm going to also probably remove my live center. And what I'm looking to do now is account for some space that I need to be able to create a finial on this box. So instead of having a line at the dead center, which would be represented right here, I probably will move it just to the right of that line and not have a very deep interior lid section. This is to account for this section from here to there, and then of course including the tenon that I have, to maybe even account for putting a loose ring on the finial if we can get to that. So one step at a time, stay in the moment with it, and we should be good. That's about where I want my initial line, which represents the initial depth. I'll probably more likely be here at the second line. This is accounting for getting a final depth. My aim will be to go to this line first, maybe just shy of it, and then I'll go to that final line. That will probably go to represent my final depth. Now what we can do is take a few different tools into the process here, into the mix. We're looking at this tool right here. That's an interior-exterior grind, as I would refer to it. And what this is accounting for is just not as much purchase on the bevel when I'm making a cut. Now again, I'm going to be making a cross cut here. I'll be cross-cutting the fiber. End of the fiber is here. So essentially what I'm looking to do is slice that fiber right through the longer grain. And I can do that from this angle of approach at about a maybe 2 o'clock position. If this is a 12 o'clock position, maybe 1 or 2 is here. Let's go ahead and get that into a handle. We're at high speed as well. We're at about 2100 RPM, maybe a little bit higher than that, but that's looking pretty good. What's nice about having a grind that's a little bit more steep at the nose, that's to say that the angle at the nose is a little bit more blunt or steep. It's maybe close to around 60 degrees. There's no such thing as a magic angle. There's no such thing as a perfect angle. There's just something that gets the job done and is better suited for a job than not. That's also a very fine cut. You can see a fine burnish develop here. I'm also looking for a very fine shaving right in this region. So that's looking good. The thing that I want to do is acquire a little bit of depth, so I'll create what's called a back hollowing cut first into this region. That's just going to show that this, I want that to be so clean that really I only have to touch it with maybe 320 or 400. So now we'll go ahead and we'll switch over to a spindle gouge and essentially create a drilling action to the interior. Just a little bit of a back hollowing cut. That's just to open up my interior just a hair. Other thing that I can do is now acquire my knowledge for something, and that's my depth. And my initial depth is what I'm after, not the second line, but rather the first. So here we go with that. Let's see where I'm at. And looks like I'm about there. That's close enough to call it good. So we're almost there, actually. Let's firstly establish an area that we can account for now having a nice flange. So this will be a box with an overfitting lid. I'm going to go only take off maybe about 1/4 of an inch at a time. You can use a square end scraper. A skew chisel works fine too. This works just as well. But what I'm looking for again right now is just a straight 90-degree wall. Sharp tool does the job for us. I do remember I had enough spalting on this exterior, and albeit it is a nice hard wood, that's healthy, the spalting's healthy in that it's not so brittle. I probably will go a little thinner than this, and also it's ever so slightly concave. So now that we have that set, we're looking good. Just to let you know, you can also scrape a surface on our exterior. Again, this is all just end grain fiber. This is 360 degrees of rotating end grain fiber. Being that's the case, and there's no intersection with the side grain in here, and I'm not digging with the tool, I can actually cut that to a very fine finish. Let's see what we have on the surface. And then we'll go ahead and actually apply some cuts with the interior exterior again. And I'm going to show you something that maybe might not be considered correct, but we can still do it anyway and get a great result. So that's probably good, considering a good width considering some of the spalting we have. Again, that's very clean. I can probably touch that with about 320, maybe 220, 320, 400. If you can be in that range, you're having a good day. It's going well. And so now what I'm going to do is make sure that, very much like the hollowing procedure, if I'm making a plunge cut hollowing on side grain, this is going to be the same exact procedure. You might think it's a little crazy to make a cut going to the interior without using a scraper, but I find that you can actually cut an interior much cleaner, at least on a shallower depth of end grain fiber, using a very fine microbevel. What it does to alter the physics slightly of this is that what I should do in contrast, or what you could do in contrast, is with all the end grain fiber spinning, is you could just take a scraper to the interior. It's not a bad idea, you can do that. What you are doing with high speed in a very small amount of purchase that's from the microbevel is maybe about 1/16 of an inch in width. As long as I'm not using a single bevel, deep fluted or not, can't use a deep fluted gouge on something like this anyway, whether it be side grain or end grain. Can't use a shallow fluted gouge. That's what this is, shallow fluted gouge. I could never actually make a cut with a single bevel to the interior. You could actually use a deep fluted gouge, but if you do, you have to make sure that you have a microbevel on the tool and that you're turning at high speed. And you actually can do it, and it works very well. That may change as we get to the interior of the base, as it may require or call for the usage of a scraper, and that's okay, nothing wrong with that. So now that we're making the cut will work the exact same way that a plunge hollowing cut would work for a side grain vessel. Looks to be a fair height right here. The 60-degree angle is also helpful to the way that I'm holding the tool to account for the body making the cut. That just means that I can hold the tool at a more perpendicular plane. So I'm still going to start at a position that's maybe around the 2 or 3 o'clock position, more like 3 o'clock, because the tool still will want to pull a little. But you can see it's actually going quite well. You shouldn't actually be able to make that cut, but you can if you have high speed and you're using a very small amount of purchase at the nose of the tool with a small microbevel. And you'll see that the surface we're cutting is burnished, which means that we really won't have to apply any sanding, or very little. Also, the usage of a scraper is not a bad thing. I don't like it when there's rhetoric that goes to show scraping is bad. Scraping is often misunderstood. It's not a bad thing. In this case, this tool is burnishing the interior. It's scraping at the same time as well. Right at the corner, 2 or 3 o'clock position, rolling inward. The angle of approach I have here is probably about 60 degrees. What I'm going to have you look at here in a second is how clean that interior is. And I only need a small section of maybe a stop right in here. That's to show that I have a nice sharp corner. That's also a helpful thing to take the skew, go in and create a small chamfer. And what that's doing is creating an area where I can actually pick up the cut a little easier. Anywhere from about 60 to 70 degrees is a fair place to approach this. Pretty nice. And I'll go ahead and actually take the skew's long point and maybe account for just a little detail in here as well. Looks like we have a little dimple there as well. That looks good. I'm actually okay with that. Little skew work should be fine with that. That's texture. At least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I think that it works well enough. Let's now go ahead and stop the lathe and see what we have. And if you look at that interior, you'll see that there's zero tear out. And we actually made a cut that's incorrect. But it's okay if what you do is alter the physics of the cut slightly with high speed, and now this is a surface that's clean enough, I really don't have to do much with it, okay? I can sand this if I wanted to and get a fine finish from that, that's okay. What I need to do now is acquire my actual final depth, and we'll see where it actually is. So I'm just being careful to the touch here because I'm not going to sand the piece. And let's see where our actual final depth is. And looks like we're somewhere close to maybe the middle line here. Magic eraser gets rid of it. There we go. Now we can actually acquire the final depth. Okay. Interior. And where were we? We were about right here. There we go. So there's our final depth. That's what you call a line you don't want to part onto or into. If you do, well, you'll have probably an almost table-sized napkin ring. I don't think it's what you want, though, at the moment. That is about where I am. Now, to go to show the line that I'm concerned with, probably more so with that. However, I'll go ahead and maybe move about 1/4 of an inch of line over, just to know that what I can do is something else. Go ahead and stop the lathe. Start to do a little bit of pre-shaping on my lid exterior. Turning this around now, we'll go ahead and clamp down onto the surface. You might wonder why I'm clamping down onto a surface I just cut cleanly enough with the skew or just burnished that I would do this. Why would I do this? Well, it's okay because this is still going to be shaped. This is also still thick enough to be able to account for a little bit of stock removal to thin out the rim here. But as you can see, the sheen on that, that's looking great straight off the tool. And again, you can cut into end grain fiber. There's just a way to do it. And if you do it properly, you'll get a very, very fine result. That's not all true. That's not true in all cases, but in this case, we have a denser fiber, and with high speed and a very small micro bevel, we can very much make this happen. So it worked. There you go. Again, what I'm looking for is not to be to the left of this little shaded line. I'm looking to be to the right of it. And so I'm not trying to put a death grip on this either, just enough to where I can do a little pre-shaping. You don't have to do it with the skew. I'll go ahead and actually maybe do so with the gouge. Here's a 3/8 gouge, starting with 2 types of cuts. One is going to be a bead rolling cut. That's starting from open at the 12 o'clock position. 12 o'clock is a reference to where the flute is positioned as I'm standing in front of the blank. 12 to maybe about, I don't know, 12 to maybe 3, somewhere in that way. The other thing that I can do is make a cove swept cut, a cove sweeping cut. That's starting at 3 and then rolling into maybe about 2 o'clock. So we'll do both for the stock removal. And that's because I don't need the tenon anymore. Tenon's done. I have to mind the line over here and just make sure that I'm just to the right of it. It looks like we are. Now, the other type of cut that I was referencing is not open to close. If I'm on a downhill portion of a area where I've created a slight contour, what I don't want to do is start open like this. That's a catch. What I'd rather do is start at an area where I'm closing the flute, being at around 3 o'clock position. That's 12, maybe 1, 2, and 3. If I start here and I just roll the tool forward, I can now create the initial sweep of a cove. There we go. And now what I can do is just account for a little bit of stock removal here. Potentially using the skew if I wanted. Let's just stick with the gouge for now. Downhill cuts. This is going to show that I'll indefinitely have a finial. Will I have a loose ring on it? We'll see. Doesn't always work out, but at this stage, what I'm doing is just giving myself a little bit of a pre-shape. Not sure what the final shape will be. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Rolling a series of beads, bead rolling cuts, just a little bit of pre-shaping into the corner. Here we go. And maybe we can go back to the skew just for fun. I don't know if anyone said that today, but I like the skew. It's a good tool if you spend a little bit of time practicing with it. I'm also on a smaller diameter, and now in this case what I'll do is lower the tool rest ever so slightly. If I'm being careful and light with my cuts, I can also peel. I have to remember I don't have a really solid hold in here. It's a good hold, but it's not so good that I should forego the amount of balance that I need in the application. So we'll be a little bit lighter to the touch, maybe creating a series of steps. What I'm also not looking to do is create the finial right now. That's for a particular reason. Well, if I create a sharp point at the end of this piece right now, and I don't have, in contrast, a flat surface. The issue is going to be that, well, I'm going to make my hand bleed, so I don't want to do that. I'd rather make sure that what I do is have a nice soft section here. And I'm hoping to be able to create a good enough fit that we won't actually need this mark at the center, mark denoting where the actual center mark is. Let's get rid of that, just so it's truly gone. Series of cuts, shear cuts, and peeling cuts, both are okay. Just removing a little bit of stock. Doesn't have to be done with the skew. Again, just to show, you can go back to using a spindle gouge, or use the spindle gouge the whole way. Although the skew is a great tool to use, I don't try to convert people to it. It's a good tool to use if it happens to be something that you like to use. If you like to use it, then use it. If not, there are other ways to make that wood shine. And looks like that's going to be enough of a region of length to account for being able to have a finial with a loose ring. Which, although we're not at that bridge yet, we haven't crossed that bridge yet, I just know that what I have is the length to do that. So, looking good here. When you pre-shape a box lid, the good thing about this is I don't have to do so much shaping later. If I have to do this later, the trouble will be is that this lid will actually be resting on a flange on a base. And that'll be a problem, because then I'll have to remove all this stock with a fit that, albeit may be good, it probably won't be good enough to not have this piece come flying off a lot. So as you can see in interior, that's a nice burnish. That's straight off the tool. Happy to see that. And then what I've done here is just shape enough around my lid exterior to account for not having to, again, remove so much stock when I'm shaping the actual final shape for the lid. Something that can be helpful is to take a set of dividers. You can take a set of dividers and just make the measurement ever so slightly proud of your interior. And now that we've done that, we'll go ahead and put on the other blank. Here's the base, because it says base. Have to know. It's helpful to know. And what I'm going to do is the very exact same thing, the same exact thing I just did on my lid exterior. Let's go ahead and true up my exterior on the base. We can use a skew. We can use a gouge. We can scrape. We can shear. We can do just about anything. In this case, I like to plane, which is a shear cut. Shear cut means there's bevel support and the tool is being applied at an angle to get a fine surface. And looks like we about have it. I'm not looking for a fine surface for application of a finish at the moment. Again, it's just for the sake of truing the piece up a second time. Why might that be important? Well, when I'm hollowing and I have a lot of undulation that's still present because I didn't go through the stage, I'm just going to have more and actually increase the amount of that at a later stage when I'm finishing my interior, should I decide to do that. So just know that you don't want to do that. You don't want to not true this up a second time. Always true these blanks up a second time. And there we go. So it looks like we have that. This little fray over here doesn't matter much. Either way, what I'll do is I'll account for something, an area where I can probably just part this off. I'll probably just do that right now using a thin parting tool. Now, the thing about this is I want to make sure that it's possible that I might be able to then use this section as, and that's this section right here, excuse me, as a jam chuck. That's a possibility. The other thing that I want to make sure of is to know that when I take this small little bit of chamfer down, I'm not taking so much material down that I'm surpassing the diameter of my tenon. If I go too far down, then I'm not going to have as much stability in the areas where I'm actually either making scraping cuts to the interior or I'm making cuts to the from the rim to the interior with the interior-exterior tool. So we'll see about that. Looks like we have what we need. Remember, that's a spinning blade. When the lathe is on and you see a corner, soften it. There we go. And also, I'll lower the tool rest just a hair, just so that I can account for truing up the face. Remember, if I have the chamfer established, which I do, I can much more easily find a point of entry with the nose of the tool. Looks pretty decent. I imagine it's pretty good. Let's go ahead and now turn the tool rest around facing the actual end grain face, and we'll see where we're at. We'll go ahead and actually apply a mark with the left leg of the divider. Here we are. Looks like it's corresponding nicely. That should be just proud of the interior diameter, and we should be able to then more easily establish a good fit. I want this box to overfit, this lid to overfit, so that it's actually quite tight, and we're looking for maybe about 1/8 of an inch gap between what will be a shoulder and then the face of this little end grain area right here. So this face should match to this region, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that right now. So let's remove a little bit of stock. Get down to that line, and I imagine we're going to be pretty close to a good fit, or an overfit. In this case, a good fit right now is about having an overfit. We'll remove a little bit more material. I can probably remove about another half of that length. That should be good enough for a suction fit if I can get one. I bet you we can do it. And that's a pretty good size flange. That's good enough for me. Good enough at the moment. Let's see where our fit is. And not quite there. I'll go ahead and keep this in my hand. It looks like I also have a handle, so I'll just keep it there. Looking for, again, not a tight fit that's actually sitting flush to the shoulder, but something that's overfit. We're getting close, so that's pretty good. I bet you that's going to be okay. Something that it's accounting for, again, maybe a solid 1/4 of an inch gap is even better. So I'm looking for a good solid overfit right now, and looking like our grain is going to match up really nicely too. So got some nice things to see here, and let's keep going. I imagine that now for my diameter here, not diameter but thickness, we'll go maybe a little thinner. About 1/4 of an inch, maybe solid 1/4 of an inch, not just proud of it, but just close to it. And, or maybe right on the money. Yeah, that's about there. I think that that's a good width at the moment. That should be okay. What I'm going to do now is actually acquire an initial depth, same as we did with the box lid section. We'll go ahead and actually place our line somewhere close to maybe the bottom 1/3 region of this container. That should be good enough for us. Now to begin the same procedure, we're going to go ahead and actually create a back hollowing cut to the interior. We'll go down as far as we need to. Somewhere towards the very center of the blank is going to be okay. Just opening up that interior, I'm actually cutting with the left wing, dropping the handle a little bit, and I'm creating a fine shaving in here. Of course, not a finished cut. Either way, it's going pretty well. And come back the other way too from the rim section. Maybe one more cut. If I say that, don't believe it. And I think that we got our final depth established. I mean, to say rather, our initial depth. Let's see where we're at. It's just a stock removal tool, or a cut, I should say. And we'll go ahead and see where we're at in terms of where we meet that line. Looks like we're a little bit beyond, and that's okay. Just have to be careful with my final cuts, because I'm not looking for a napkin ring. So that's actually my line right there. Let's see what we can do. Let's firstly actually widen the surface a little bit. One of the things that we can do is to open up the interior. We could have done this on the lid. I just wanted to show a clear shot of being able to get a very fine surface from an interior-exterior tool. Now that we've seen that, we're kind of moving along. We can use a spindle gouge to just widen the interior a little bit, being that what we're actually doing is cutting the longer grain. So we're basically pulling the longer fiber this way, and that's an okay thing to do. What I don't want to do, again, is to take the tool straight into the fiber like this. That's not what I want. I promise you it's not what you want either. All the way to that line should be good. That works far enough. I usually find that when the plunge that I'm making surpasses the length of the wing, then the cut can be a little dangerous. I'm getting pretty close now to say putting it down. Why don't I take a break on that? Now we'll go ahead and grab a skew. We could use a square end scraper as well. Skew works fine. If you're having too much kickback or catch with a square end tool that only has one single bevel on the underside, a skew may be a more reasonable option. That's why we're using it at the moment, just to show you that you can use something else to make that cut and cut efficiently. High speed, we're at about 2100 RPM. We'll go a little faster. Not taking a lot of material off. Cutting clean. I want to still make sure that I have about a solid 1/4 inch of material at the base flange for this particular piece. Only removing maybe about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch at a time. Pretty nice cut there. That actually creates a very nice clean surface on my interior as well when I make that cut. Let's see what I have. High speed does help. A sharp tool, even better. Looks like we're good in here. And no tear out to speak of. And let's see if we can keep that trend going. And all I'm doing right now is creating an initial sweep. The initial sweep is basically commentary on the type of contour I can expect at where the area of the flange is. And that's going to be from this region inward. Looks like I've established that nicely. Let's see if this will do the job. I think that it will. If not, we can also revert to using a round nose scraper. So that's going to be okay. Let's firstly start maybe with the interior tool. Removing some of that dust so I can actually see. It's helpful to see when you're turning. Now we'll go ahead and actually utilize a fulcrum with the lathe, and we'll account for having a nice ability to hold ourselves onto it nicely. That's going pretty well. All the way to that interior. Happy to see that cut. That's very clean in there. Just to show something else, because we can also scrape clean. We won't burnish the interior, but that's okay. A burnish isn't better than getting a surface that doesn't have tear out on it. As long as it's tear out free, that's a good thing. So I'm aiming to pick up a small flange in here. Looks like I almost have it. And I'm taking a very fine cut. Again, this isn't a cut that you should necessarily be able to make. But again, we're just altering the physics slightly with the micro bevel, high speed, and just a fine touch. And you'll find that that'll get you somewhere. And looks like we made it all the way down. And we'll still go and talk about the usage of a scraper just because. We could probably call that good. Either way, something about a scraper is that I typically keep my angle from the heel of the tool, which is the underside of the bevel, all the way from the heel, bevel, and the nose of it, or just around the entire circumference of where the bevel is, to be somewhere around 60 degrees. Anywhere from about 60 to 70 degrees I find to be acceptable. Typically, if you're under 50 degrees with a scraper, this tool is going to be far more aggressive, and I think that most people who are turning that don't realize that might think that there is issues with the catch and being too aggressive. Of course, in the area where you have multi-grain fiber, that's at this angle, that's going to be the reason why the catch occurs. That's again, the multi-grain fiber alongside a too sharp, of an angle on the tool. That's the scraper. That's an issue. Essentially what happens is that I have longer grain on the sidewall, and as this longer grain bottoms out, turns into just end grain that's running here like this across the interior. So if I take the tool at an angle and I dig, essentially I'm cutting directly into the cross grain, which isn't bad, but then when I'm scraping to the left or right, I'm pulling fiber on the cut that's going back towards the center. So I'm tearing out over here. I'm not tearing out necessarily here when I pull towards the wall, but towards the center. That's actually pulling too much fiber, not a good cut. So if you are using a scraper, it's a good cut as long as you understand and apply a bevel angle that's a slightly steeper, and in this case about 60 to 70 degrees is a fair place to be, as I've found. I want to make sure that what I can do is actually see what I'm doing. That's helpful. I can. And I'm going to raise the tool rest a little bit. And looks like we're able to do it. Now we can get to that interior. There's a slight downward angle that I apply the scraper with. And that's working well. If I'm using a scraper, I just have to make sure that when I get to the area that is at the corner here, that's the area where there's end grain, the denser grain meeting the side grain, and I have to be very light to the touch. The scraper just does not need to be used aggressively, but it's really a wonderful tool and it's okay to use. So is actually making a cut that I was just showing with the interior tool, smaller bevel. Very light touch here. It's not loud, not a lot of squealing and squawking. It's pretty quiet. Turning, again, should not be a loud endeavor. It should be something that is not disrupting library hour for someone in the corner. Not being aggressive. And again, what I'm pulling is very fine dust. And if I'm doing that and being light to the touch, especially in the region of the corner here, that's a good thing. I would rather pull because I'm pulling where there's fiber support, bending this direction. If I dig and pull towards the center, that's where I'll find that I have more tear out. So I want to be able to turn this still very clean, straight off the tool. And even though I have accessibility with the other tool, I just like being able to show that you can use other tools. And if I do go forward with the skew, or with the scraper, excuse me, I'm just being very light. Probably about as light as I am when I'm pulling anyway. And as far as I can tell, I think that we've applied some good cuts, and we have a clean enough surface to probably call finished, just about. I have a small little ridge in here still. We'll go ahead and get that out. So I think that's going to be okay. Just to show I care a little bit about this piece, if I can get a smaller tool in there, I will. Smaller tool in this case will be a skew, and that will be to apply a V-groove at the center. And there we go. We have a little bit of a mark there. Let's see what we have for an interior. I'm just looking for a surface that's void of any tear out and doesn't really have any ridges in it, and it looks like that's what we've done here. So that's a clean enough surface that I'm happy with it. So now what we're looking at is where our final depth is. And where might that be? Let's see where it is. And it looks like I'm at the very tail end of this piece, and I have probably about a solid 1/8 of an inch, or maybe exactly an 1/8 of an inch. Looks like I'm right about here. So I don't have a whole lot of material to work with. It's very likely that what I'll do is just shape into the region of where this little parting line is, and where that is will actually add maybe another 1/16 of an inch, giving me a little bit more material there. So, but nonetheless, I do need to know where that line is. And again, that line matters, the others on the piece don't. So again, back to using a favorite magic eraser of mine in the form of a skew. But that interior is clean. If I wanted to sand that, I could probably start at a higher grit, and that's withstanding the scraping motion and application. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Feel good about that. So now what I'm going to do is see how the fit is. It should be about the same. There's been no sanding done. And now what I have is the same exact fit as it should be. So now what we'll do is remove a little bit of stock at the flange area, and then start getting some proportions set for how we're going to lay this piece out, and start doing some shaping. So into the corner with the skew's long point, and I'm using the smaller skew. Very fine cuts here. Blood in the veins policy is a good policy again. Being that I'm not going to sand this piece, a fine chamfer is an acceptable thing on this section. Also on the section out here where the end of my base section is before the flange. Nice and smooth. And for a fit, what do I have? What do we have here? Looking pretty good. A good fit is one where I can probably go ahead and actually hear a snap or a pop, perhaps. That's a snap or a pop, so that's not so bad. Snap, crackle, pop's not a good sound. It means you probably broke something. But in the case that we have here, we did pretty good. I want to say that for a good fit would be one where it's commentary on being able to grab something that accounts for being able to lean all the way back. It's probably not a good idea if I fall right now, but if I did, that shows you I probably don't have the fit that I want. But a good fit is one where I'm actually leaning back on my heels, and I can't actually pull that off. However, if I do come up to the lid section on and just take it with my wrist, I should be able to pop that right off. And so there we go. That's a good fit. I'm happy with it. And I also have a line right here established to know how far I cannot go over. But that's a good fit. And let's keep going. High speed is helpful. in here first. This is going to establish not needing to have to check in with this line that I've created. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of pre-shaping here first, down the cove sweep of this lid. It's a pretty good hold. Still have to be light to the touch. It's certainly not a chuck. So what I'll do is actually create an OG shape, which is essentially where a cove meets a half bead. This is a cove going in at about 3 o'clock, slightly rolling into 2, and then back to 3. So 3, 2, and then 3. Pretty good finish there. I wouldn't say that that's my final finish. Let's see what the result is straight off the tool. It's probably decent. And yeah, that's pretty good. I'd say that there's no tear out and that's burnished. So I'm happy with that surface. Let's also go to show that now we need to trip the exterior of both the lid and the base sections together. High speed now. It's been mostly high speed, I guess back to high speed. We're making a nice planing cut. And I want to make a nice round shape in here. I can use the short point of this skew as well. The nice thing about the convex sweep of the skew's shorter point is I don't actually have to hold the tool at an angle. I can keep it straight, and as long as I keep it straight and I'm at the convex swept area, shouldn't have a catch. Doesn't mean you won't. It's just about decreasing likelihoods. A little bit of a peel. And looks like we're doing pretty well. I don't want this box base to be too small yet, but now I'll come back to the other side using the short point cutting to the right. I do like this form, I like where it's going. The other thing that I can do is accentuate this piece a little bit with a bead. If not a bead, just make sure that the V-groove is opened up a hair. Other thing that might be helpful is to use a tool that's a little bit smaller. This case using a 1/2 inch skew might be the answer. Let's try that. And I think we got it. I think we do, I think we do. And looking good here. Don't need that line there anymore at the area where the jam chuck will be. And as far as bringing this down further, I think that that's probably about all I need to do. But I have the initial form set. What I'll do now is just do a little bit of pre-shaping on the finial section, keeping the tool in a more open position. Accidents happen, so it's okay. This is the time when you start cheering yourself on. And right now what I'm looking to do is find an area where I can put a bead and potentially create a loose ring. Let's see if we can do it. Doesn't always work, and that's okay. We've gone far enough to see some things that are probably interesting enough that I'm not so dissatisfied. I think that it's pretty good what we've done here. What I'm going to do is grab the smaller skew, 1/2 inch. Do I have the clearance to account for some of the cuts I'd like to make? I think I might. If you use a nice strong prominent pinch on the tool at the nose, should be pretty good. I'm not actually pushing into the material so much, being very light to the touch. The tool rest is also a fulcrum, so there's a little ring. Roll a bead. We can use the long point as well. I don't have as wide of a bead to cut, so I won't start with the short point. Typically I'll start with the short point with a bead. And looks like that's down to an area that I've created enough of a cove that that piece will probably come off. If I make some fine cuts to the other side, I'll go ahead and continue those cuts, preserving some blade life with the gouge. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll continue with the gouge here. The final shapes are yet to be decided. I'm just not there yet. I haven't crossed that bridge. Round a bead before you cross a bridge, I guess, in this case. It's also better to keep a bead much thinner. In this case, just so I don't actually have to have near as much clearance to the underside of it when I break it free. And it's an if and when type of thing. Essentially, I'm just making cuts that are quite open shearing cuts. And looks like I can probably bring the long point of the skew over. Have to be careful. Probably didn't need to mention that, but I'm just reminding myself to do that. And short point is going well in here. Let's go ahead and see if I can bring this down a little further. This is the time where lids come flying off. And let's go ahead and make sure that the bead that I've created here is nice and round, but also as thin as I'd like it to be for the sake of being able to, again, not have so much clearance on the underside of this cut, underside of the bead. Very similar to how I'd make a bead on or loose ring on the top. It's really the same exact thing. The added tension here is really just the fact that, well, the hold that I have here is good, but it's not like it's so good that I'm without concern. I have some concern still. When I get into this region, again, long points going directly underneath the bead. It looks like the long point's going directly underneath, probably as far in as the center area. So I bet you that'll probably come loose here in a second. Let's go ahead and see if that's a possibility. If you can't do it, don't get too frustrated. Oh, and there it goes. We still have it. That just goes to show we can get right back to it. So, no harm, no foul. We still have a thick enough section here that we can get this right back on, and I bet you we can make it happen. Let's try that again. Things get a little fuzzy sometimes. Let's see if we can go back to it. Looks like we probably just need a little bit of finger support here. The other thing that we can do, potentially, is remove a little bit more stock. In here. Very light to the touch if we can help it. And you can see I'm only using the nose of the tool to make that cut. Into the corner now. It looks like we're adding a little bit of detail in this region that might account for a little bead, maybe to match this one. But of course I'm still going to try to loosen that ring. If we can get it, that'll be again a good day. So we'll just shape the box down a little bit more. This is also going to show that if I were to have to remove quite a bit more material, and I didn't pre-shape the box, well, you can imagine this beast would be flying quite a bit more. The other cut that we can also make on this exterior is with an interior tool. We'll go ahead and apply that. I liked the burnish that we got from it, so we'll keep it going. What you're looking at is a very fine surface due to the type of shaving we're creating here. Right at the nose with the micro bevel, and that micro bevel really does good things for us. And if you can see this shaving, this is what I'm looking for a final finish on that surface. And it looks like I about have it. Keep going just a little bit more. I like to think of the tools as the application of fine art, because it's not easy to do this. Takes a little time spent, a little skill development, and some practice. And I think that that's more of what I want to see for a finial section. Let's maybe thin this area out a little bit on the actual top of the finial. Have to be very careful. I think we know that by now. I can also round that little bead right in this region. So it's just basically going into the application of fine detail. And the fine detail just requires finesse. Light touch. That looks to be a design that I'm fairly happy with. If you can say that, then you're doing pretty good. Let's get back to maybe this region with the skew. Again, the difficulty is just the fact that I just don't have a lot of support at the flange. I have enough. I like doing this for a demo again because I don't mind if something goes wrong. I know that wood can burn. I also know that you can get back to it. And if I make this box again, I'll make a better version of it. So, lower the tool rest a little bit more so. Just repositioning my body a little bit, just making sure I have a fulcrum also established at the lathe. Oftentimes fine detail work does require moving into the lathe a little bit, but not being aggressive if you can help it. Also, the lathe spinning very fast. And I wonder if I can actually break that free now. It's probably pretty close. I think it might actually help to shape a little bit up here too. Oh, looks like not. Looks like I can in that case. I think I need a fresh edge. Time for a fresh edge. So now that we're back from a fresh edge, a couple of fresh edges, I've made sure that I have a fresh burr on this top side of the tool. This is my top side as I see it, just typically because I make most of my peeling cuts going from the right to the left. And most of the downstroke is actually hitting the top of the rake here. And that's actually what's that's the reason why this would be considered my top side, to then have the burr. But also fresh edge on this tool. One other addition I've decided is I'm going to actually add maybe a ply or two of just some paper towel. And this should be accounting for then having the hold necessary to remove that ring. It's a bit of a difficult project. As the tensions mount, I should say, I want to go ahead and make sure that I get this done right. And we're getting close enough to it. I just want to maybe add a single ply first. Paper, that's a little paper towel trick. And I hope that that's going to work for us. Looks like it will. I'll go ahead and actually lock the spindle. And I think that that's probably looking good. I'll go ahead and just pull the paper towel, and that should give me a little bit more of a ply now to be able to continue doing the shaping that I would like. It's fun to work with. Okay, here we go. Back to it. If you do add something like a ply of paper there, that can get a little annoying because it's in the way. You can just take your skew, go right up to there and remove some of that. I'm going to go ahead and actually see how this is working with paper towel included. And that's looking to be the type of fit that I need now to be able to finish these cuts. Have to be really careful in this region. Also, the varying density of this wood is pretty difficult to work with at the moment. So there we go. That's just to true up that section. Light touches. A little bit of added ply made the job a little easier. And maybe we can finish that with the skew. Wants to come off, but I think I still need a little bit more material taken out of here in this region. And again, I think I need to drop the tool rest just a hair more. If I do that, that's actually putting the nose of the tool directly, I think, in the area that I need to have it to be able to remove that material. In here, I don't have a lot of clearance. And let's see what we can do on this other side, if anything. What I'm aiming to do is just get the ring, and once I have it, if I can get it, then I'll actually be able to do the shaping that I would like to do. And it looks like we actually finally got it. That actually feels good. That's quite a relief. So there it is. It's pretty good considering the type of hold that we have, so I'm happy with that. That's a pretty good day. We can now come back to maybe making some finalized cuts. Remember that thing called a spindle gouge? That's okay to use that too. Nice full bead in here. Happy with the way this is going. But I think that I also could do something and add a V-groove around here as well. I think I will. Just a small V groove. Don't really need anything else, I think, on the top of the lid. I think that's about all the detail I need, just a small touch. That's all I'm really looking for, okay? But we have a nice loose ring. What we could also do is account for a slightly different shape in our finial section. Let's see what we can do. The end of this finial wants to pull, and now we can actually do a little bit of shaping. Let's try to keep this on, though. I think maybe that's what we'll do. Essentially rolling a bead. Go with the tool that's working well for you, what's working out. I do, in fact, like to show more than one type of tool to make a nice cut. It looks like we have a pretty decent shape here. We're about getting there. And that's probably about all I'm going to take off where I'm actually going to have a loose ring. That's maybe what I would call a captive ring at the moment. Or what is a captive ring. Maybe we can keep it about there. That's granting me the clearance that I need to still do some shaping into this region of the swell. This is a elongated cove. I think I'll call that good, just about. Making sure that I have a ring that's going to sort of sing on the stem here. I want it to look good. I want this form to be very fine. We could probably also add one more bead in here. Why not? Here we are with the skew. It's a bit of a relief to be able to not have to deal with cutting that ring off anymore. So I'll just go and maybe hold that aside. Maybe we'll put a couple beads there. Why not? As long as I choke up on the tool a little bit so I'm near the ferrule of the tool, should be able to do it. Using the thumb, as you can see, just to account for a little bit more fulcrum support. I don't have a whole lot. Don't have a whole lot. But we have enough. Kind of fine detail work that gets a little scary. But it's really not. Again, it's just wood. And it's just a matter of being able to challenge yourself a little bit. This is quite a challenge. But it's fun. As long as you're having fun, you had a good day. And that's probably right as far as I can take that ring before this is going to come off. And that's pretty much the effect I wanted to create. So essentially, it's almost like a spinning top lid, almost. Lid doesn't spin, though. We do know that it pops off. And there we go. I think that that's probably the type of form that I'm looking for on my top. I'm happy with that. I think that that's going to be okay. Let me just make sure that I'm satisfied with overall proportions on the lid section. And what do we have here? Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. That's looking good. Happy with it. So now we'll go ahead and actually take some cuts downhill a little bit more so, keeping the elongated shape of this sort of ellipsoid shape. Raise the tool rest just a hair more, and now we'll go ahead and actually create a slight bit of a taper to this form. More so. You have to be careful with that long point, because if you close the nose of the tool in this direction, that's actually creating a V groove. Essentially, that V groove should be here when the tool is actually facing across the bed of the lathe. But we have enough detail on this piece and figure, I should say, that's to say detail on the lid. I'd say that's a fair amount of detail. We probably don't need any more, we just need a fine form. Short points, less aggressive. the skew, you have to make sure that you're establishing bevel support first. If you read a burnish mark first, that's a good thing. The burnish mark's actually showing you something. It's showing you how much pressure you need to apply if you see one. So that's a burnish mark, that's a burnish mark, that's a burnish mark. Looking to create one, and when I see one, then I actually move the body forward, propelling the tool in that direction, and that looks to be more of a form that I'm happy with. And what I'm looking to make sure I have is no tear out, and that the size of the base is large enough that I can count for maybe a small beaded base, potentially. In terms of what I need for a flange that's accounting for removing stock on the very base here when I make a jam chuck, I only need probably about 1/4 of an inch. What I'm doing right now is just accounting for material that can be acquired to have a small foot. And I think that's what I want. What I'm accounting for now, though, as I stop the lathe, is just overall proportions. And I see some burnish marks in here. That looks good. The overall form's nice. I probably will add a slight widened V-groove in this area. Should still be a good fit. It's just not the type of fit that responds so well to a skew, as we can see, at least until you thicken the ply up at the hole. But we still have a very nice piece here. So what I'm looking to do is get rid of the burnished lines if I can with the skew. The skew is a finishing tool or a destroying tool. I mean, you know, tools will do what you would like with them, or maybe not. Practice helps. Do practice. And as you can see from the video, there's no such thing as perfection. Aim for progress. Always aim for progress. Yeah, that's going to be it. Now, what I'll do is widen the V-groove a little bit if I can. Probably a little risky, but that's okay. We've been creating enough risk here and potential hazards that I'm okay with it. When you get this far, a little bit of motivation may be knowing that if you do get this far, something flies off. Look how far you got anyway. You should be proud of that. Or you might say, there's no way in hell I'll try that, and I will never use a skew day in my life. That's also okay. That does not offend me. There we go. So I think that that's the form I'm looking for. I like it. So what I'll do, remove my lid, but firstly maybe we'll just see the overall proportions. And that's a box that's cut clean, no tear out on it at this point. There's a nice loose ring on it, as we can see. I fought hard for that one, and I'm happy to see that. If I'm being a perfectionist, which I swear I'm not, that's not true, I am. I'm going to go ahead and actually chamfer this little corner right in here, a little bit more so. I think that's a little stark of a shape, and I would like to make sure I have the shape that I want. If you spent this much time on it, go ahead and actually go for that extra mile. There we go. I think that's all I needed to do. There it is again. Pretty nice piece there. I don't even think it needs a finish. I'm happy with it straight off the tool. It doesn't diminish the figure. Fine tool control will in fact create a burnish. You're heating up the tenons in the fiber, and what that does is create a nice waxy film across the surface. I'm looking to also know something about being a shavings connoisseur. And all woodturners are shavings connoisseurs, or they at least probably should be. A cut that actually produces a shaving like this. This is called a flying lid. If you go to the smaller scale, you're looking for a much finer shaving straight off the tool, which just means that the amount of purchase at the bevel, or just the amount of usage of the bevel, is much less. So that's maybe something to know. Pretty good fit here, but that's also being helped by this little bit of paper that I have around the surface. And now we can take that off. That's done. We should probably still have a pretty decent finish. It's actually a pretty good wall thickness too. I like it. A good piece here, no tear out. Inside's burnished as well. Outside is looking pretty good. Happy with it. So let's see what we have. Pretty good finish here. That's good. Let's take this off. Thin parting tool does the trick half the time. In this case, great tool to have around. If I can make this base slightly concave right now, that's a good thing. That just means I'll have to true up the tear out that I'm creating, given that the type of cut that I'm making is a scraping cut, so this side of the edge is really tearing out the end grain fiber. And that's about to come off, and there it is. Let's actually go ahead and finish the base. Let's see where we are. Now we're actually measuring a different area. We're going to measure just proud of the interior. Just proud of that interior. And it looks like that's about where we need to be. That's about where we should be. Looking good. It looks like we can apply that. Let's do something else perhaps. Let's move the piece out just a hair. So we still have maybe about 1/4 of an inch material being clamped down onto on this tenon, and I think that we're going to be okay. Let's go ahead and make sure that we have a nice tight hold there. We do, and looks good. That's giving us just a little bit more material to work with. Onto it now. Larger skew just to preserve a little bit of blade life in the smaller one. Smaller 1/2 inch. This is the 1 inch. Let's just true this area up a little bit. Make sure that we also have a little bit of a shoulder. If we have a tenon and a shoulder, that's a good day as well, because it's accounting for having an area where we can have the face of the rim on my base section abut against something, and that's going to be helpful for us. Shoring up the face now a little bit more so. It doesn't have to be a shear cut like this. It can just be a cut that's accounting for truing up the undulation, and that's all we're looking to do at the moment. Looks like that's about where we are. Let's see what we can do. Now we'll actually bring the base section over. Again, when you make a jam chuck like this, I'm looking to create this flange that will then fit into the interior. I want to make sure that what I'm doing is having a shoulder. So I'm making a very straight 90-degree cut downward. Looks like I'm now into the area where the piece is sitting maybe just proud to have an overfit. Face of the jaws, though, should not be against the face of the chuck at all. Should be against material, solid material. And nice and flat, nice and flush. So now the box is in my hand, or the box base is in my hand. That's not quite there. That's a little too overfit. A little bit of a burnish mark on this area now shows that what I'm able to do is create a hold. And that's probably a very good hold. And maybe what we can do is now finish the base. I bet you we can. I'm going to go ahead and put a good grip on that, a little bit more than what I have. It's a very thin amount of material. Don't have a lot of material there. Not a lot. And we're just about done. And as long as I have a nice hold here, I bet you I'm able to make it all happen here. But that should be good enough to show that we are spinning true, and I guess that we made it. Looks like we're good. I'm going to go ahead and hold up the lid section and just see what kind of base I should maybe afford myself. And I think that a slight bead at the base might be a nice touch. Back to the skew. Thought I'd be finished with it by now. Maybe what I can do is create a small little bead in this region. Why not? Let's just make sure that when we stop the lathe, or if we can feel for something, what I'm feeling for is not having any tear out in the region of where the foot is. And I think we got it. Let's go ahead and stop the lathe. You have to stop the lathe to actually know this. Let's see what we got. Looks like we do. We have a little bit of a tear right in this region. Let's go ahead and actually get that going, as in going away. Don't have a lot of material here, just have to essentially use a different fulcrum on the skew. The skew does have more than one bevel, or actually more than one fulcrum. You have two bevels, of course, but you have fulcrum support from both sides of the bevels because the bevels are also a fulcrum, and you have them on the side of the tool as well. This region, if you're not actually touching the material, you can rub the surface of a very thin section to create a burnish mark first. Then if you do that, you can actually roll the tool very nicely. And looks like we're doing good here. I think that we're okay. Let's stop it one more time so that we can check for any tear out at that bead. And what do we have? Looks like it's almost gone. Shall I say one more cut? One more cut. That's 1, 2, 3 cuts. Usually one more cut means about 5 to 10. I'm at about 7. Where are we now? Yep, looks like one more cut was 7. Now just to do a little work on the base. The nice thing about the ease in which I can apply cuts here is I already have a slightly concave base, meaning that I can just go ahead and pick a fine cut with the gouge if I want. Let's not do that. Let's use a skew. Let's firstly maybe true this area up a little bit if we can. Not a clean cut. What I'm doing is just making sure to set the stage for not having so much of an issue. This is a good hold, but there we go. That's just truing up a little bit of material. Having done that made the cut quite a bit easier. There we go, all the way towards the center. And there's a V-groove maybe out here. V-groove at the center. Another. Another. And another. And you can probably do that all day long. Let's see what we have. I do want to account for the figure that is in this piece to show me something. And that something is that I probably don't need any more figure than that on the base. It's just to show that I care a little bit about the process at the stage, and I'm happy with what we have here. I think that that's done. Good project, and takes a little practice and skill. Nonetheless, let's see what we have. What we have in this particular project is an end grain box with an added bit of design here and skill set applied with the skew chisel to have a loose ring on the finial section right here. This is very similar to how you would create a top with a loose ring on it, albeit with the added challenge of knowing that you have not a great hold to work with, but one that's good enough that if you spend a little bit of time with the skew and a little practice with it, you can actually end up with a nice and fine result. I think that this box turned out well. This doesn't actually have a finish on it. This is turned straight off the tool with no tear out on it. Both the interiors are burnished pretty well, especially the interior with the lid. This was a lid that was created using the interior-exterior ground tool, which is just a deep-fluted bull gouge that has a very fine and thin micro bevel on it. And this accounts for being able to change and, again, alter the physics of the cut a little bit so that we can make cuts in the same way that we would make a plunge hollowing cut on side grain. This is a project that will probably develop some skill for you and give you some inspiration because it's not easy. But it's one that is maybe interesting to watch, and you'll see some elements of tool control and some finesse and the ability to apply a range of different tools to get a fine result. Hope you enjoy.